All right, so we are on Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11.
The second half? Or?
Yeah, we're on Hebrews 11, and then we're going to look at look at Hebrews 11. We're going to start at 22, 23-ish. So remember the heart of Hebrews is the superiority of Christ over Jewish ideas that they thought that they were tempted into apostasy. They were tempted into walking away from the faith. And the author of Hebrews, most likely Apollos, most likely Barnabas, could be Paul, one of the three, before 70 A.D., is saying that Jesus is better than these four ideas that you guys have, and that is angels, right? Jews believe that the angels gave the Ten Commandments to Moses, right? So they upheld angels, and kind of like in the book of Daniel, and they believe that Jesus was possibly a glorified angel, kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're saying nope, Christ is more superior than angels. He is more superior than Moses, okay, Moshe, and obviously Moses is the highest, in my opinion, like character or person in Judaism. Like you're not going to get any higher than Moses, but Jesus is more superior, more better than Moses. Jesus is more superior than the Levitical priesthood, right? They wanted to bring back the Levitical priesthood, and the author of Hebrews saying, nope, he's better than he has the Melchizedek priesthood, one that's more superior, right? Melchizedek being a figure from Genesis chapter 14, and Christ is more superior, number 4, than the sacrifices of animals, right? Because they wanted to bring back sacrificial animals before the temple. Again, the temple got destroyed. There's no point. Right, but Jesus is better than this. As a result, there's an exhortation for the author of Hebrews to the people to continue in their faith. Okay, and he gives examples, and he says, and then brings up Hebrews 11. This is where Hebrews 11 comes along, is when he suggests, and when he communicates, here are these examples. And it stems from Hebrews 10:39. Remember, there's no chapter division at all. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but those who have faith and preserve their souls. Okay, that's how it ends. And then it goes on in chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. But you see how there's a continuation? So it's who have faith and that preserves their souls. Who are these people? And he gives a list, right? And he goes into Hebrews chapter 11. The first section dealt with Abel. It dealt with Enoch. It dealt with Noah. And this is people, how they interacted with God before civilization. Okay? Before there was any Bible, before there was the chosen people of God, the Jews, right? Before any of that. It was always faith. And it still is always faith. Okay? Again, Enoch before Abraham, right? Abel before Abraham, Noah before Abraham. Okay, but the means was always faith, and then he goes on from there to Abraham, and then he talks about essentially Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and ends off in chapter verse 22 saying, by faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. Okay? Have you guys heard that before? So, remember, and we can read this too. This is very fascinating and just very interesting. A lot of people know about like the bones of Joseph. You know Joseph was mummified? Right? Like a mummy? Someone read Genesis 50, verse 24 to 25. Maybe 26 if you want. Genesis 50, verse 24 to 26, if someone wants to read that. Okay. And I'll have someone else read Exodus 13:19. Who wants to read that? Exodus 13:19. Exodus. And then someone else read Joshua 24:32. Joshua 24:32. Who wants to do that?
I'm doing Exodus.
Oh,
Are
okay.
you doing it? I'll do a different one.
That's fine, I can go Genesis. Genesis what?
Only I don't remember
Genesis,
what you told me.
it's the last 3 verses of all of Genesis. Oh, so Genesis 50:24-26, Exodus 13:19. Okay, and if someone wants to get Joshua 24:32, I could read that if you want.
Okay, so Genesis
Yeah, who wants to read Genesis
30.
50, verse 24?
What chapter though? Or is there one? No.
Your Exodus 13,
Yeah,
13, 19, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
but is that chapter or?
13:19, chapter 13, verse 19,
Verse 19.
Oh,
and then. So Genesis, this is all about the bones of Joshua. Okay, not a lot of people know about this, but remember, look at the verse. Okay, Hebrews 11. It says, "By faith, Joseph at the end of his life made mention of the Exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones." Has anyone heard that before? Joseph in the direction of his bones? No? All right. So these are the last words of Joseph in the book of Genesis. So this is Genesis 50:24-26. Virginia?
And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110 years old, 110 years, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt.
Mummified. It's mummified. Okay, but remember this. Joseph, remember this. He was 17 years old, trafficked by his own brothers, right? Could have been dead, but Reuben rescued, said, hey, right? And they trafficked him instead. What happened is instead of becoming a slave, or he ends up becoming the second most powerful person in all of Egypt, right? His brothers come because of the famine in Israel, right? And obviously time has gone by. His stature probably is different. He's got the mascara, the Egyptian mascara over his eyes, and they're staying in front of him. They don't even know who he is, and he knows who they are, right? And he's testing them. He wants to know about Benjamin, his real biological, his own brother, right? Essentially, the end of the chapter. Remember that whole God meant it for evil, you meant it for evil, God meant it. That's verse 20, right? That the context is he's speaking to his brothers, and his brothers are scared because Isaac died, their dad, and the fear was once dad dies, Joseph is going to kill us because of what we did to him when he was 17 years old, right? He held a grudge possibly, and what he's saying is, no, I'm free. Am I on the throne of God? I don't do that stuff, right? But his one request was, I'm in Egypt, and I've always been in Egypt, and when he's 110 years old, my one request is to take my bones back to the homeland, Israel. So essentially, that's where my heart is. My heart, he's never been there. Since he was 17 years old, he was 110. 110 years old, and he's never been back to his home until it's almost 100 years, right? But his one request, make sure my bones, my body, essentially is buried. Okay? Now, do you think they did it right away? They didn't do it right away, right? What happens is that his body's there, he's mummified, and lo and behold, Moses comes into the picture. This is like 400 years. So, Exodus 13:19, Trish? Exodus 13:19.
When Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her with timbrels and dancing. Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted."
Is that 13:19?
I think you're on the wrong one.
Yeah, 13.
You think I am?
Yeah.
Exodus 13.
Exodus 13,
Yeah,
19.
that's what yeah. I
That's
went to
okay.
15, I think. Okay, wait. It's the next page. Sorry.
You're good.
Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place.
Okay, so wait, his bones weren't buried then. So Moses, he knew about this oath that Joseph had to his brothers and the people, but they didn't do it. Right? His body, so Joseph, his mummified body, is still in Egypt. Right? Moses is there, right? This is the Exodus, chapter 13, verse. So his body's still there. Okay? So now Moses is like, you know what? I'm going to fulfill Joseph's request of burying his bones in Israel. So now the brothers of Joseph are gone. They're dead, long gone. Okay? The Israelites have gone. Now we have a Pharaoh that has no clue who he's an enemy of the Hebrew people. Now Moses is there, and he's like, wait, we have to fulfill Joseph's request, which means it wasn't fulfilled. Okay? Joshua 24:32. Who wants to read that? Joshua 24:32. Did Moses do it? Right? Obviously, Moses didn't enter into the promised land, so he couldn't have done it. Okay? Joshua 24:32.
As for the bones of Joseph, which the people of Israel brought up from Egypt, they buried them at Shechem, in a place of land that Jacob bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Sheshan, for 100 pieces of money. It became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph.
Okay, so Joshua 24:32. It was so Joseph says, hey, one last request. When I die, I want you to take my bones and bury them in my homeland, Israel. To his brothers. They didn't do it. Right? But that request, obviously, they knew about. Hundreds of years later, Moses gets it, and all of a sudden, he remembers it, but remember, he cannot enter into the promise. So they're carrying the mummified body of Joseph through the Red Sea, right? Through the 40 years of the wilderness. Yeah, he's just like, for 40 years. And then finally, in Joshua's generation, they do it, and they bury him in Shechem, which is in Israel. So 400 years, the request of Joseph, my one request, just bury my bones in my homeland Israel. That's where my heart's at. I'm here governing this foreign place called Egypt, but my one request is to bury my bones in my homeland.
Why
Right?
do you think the brothers didn't do that
Don't know.
after what
They probably just stayed there. They probably just ended up staying in Egypt. Yeah, the Hebrew people stayed in Egypt, and they just expanded, but they did not go back. And then Moses finally comes, right? And he says, oh, we got to fulfill, right? And what's the implication? Yeah, it was a mummified body, right? They preserved the body, right? And as a result, they carried that all the way till Moses couldn't do it because he never entered the promised land. And then all of a sudden, Joshua, his generation, finally does it. So if you were to take from when that request was made to the fulfillment of it, it was 400 years. 400 years.
Is it marked anywhere?
What's that?
Is it marked in Israel?
No, we don't know. This is 4,000 years ago. Yeah, this is very similar to the death of David Livingstone. I don't know if you heard of the missionary David. He was he's a missionary. He was a doctor missionary from Great Britain in the 19th century. And he was a missionary doctor in sub-Saharan Africa, Zambia, modern day Zambia. And he'd walk from village to village to village to village, taking care of the African people. And he walked approximately 29,000 miles. Okay, so that's more than the equator of the Earth. Okay, the equator is like 24,000 miles. So imagine all that walking he did. But he eventually died because of malaria. It was in the 19th century. Okay? But what happened was that when he died, the African people is that they took his body. They obviously wrapped it up, and they walked 1,000 miles to the coast. 1,000 miles to the coast, because they wanted to bury his body in Westminster Abbey, where he's buried today, in England. Okay? 1,000 miles on foot, which is 9 months. So the African people spent 9 months carrying this guy by the name of David. He's a missionary. Okay? 9 months. So his body, his physical body, is in England. But what the African people did while he was in Zambia was they cut his heart out. They took his heart and they buried it in Zambia, because that was David Livingstone's request. So David Livingstone, his request was, when I die, I want you to take my heart and I want you to bury it here in Central Africa, because this is where my heart is, with the people here of Africa. But my body is going to be in England, in Westminster Abbey, because they're going to honor me there. Right? So, again, the body of David Livingstone in England, where's his heart? It's in Zambia, it's in Africa. And that was his request.
I was in Zambia, but I don't remember anybody
Yeah.
telling me that.
But you parallel that with the story of Joseph, right? In the sense of, when I die, I have this one request of where to be buried. There's a specific reasoning for that, because this is where my heart is. Very similar to David Livingstone. You see that? So, the point of it being is that Joseph had faith, right? There was a faith, but there was no fulfillment until it happened 400 years later. That's why he's mentioned all of a sudden in Hebrews, where it says, by faith Joseph at the end of his life made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. That's why it's mentioned in Hebrews, right? Is that you could have faith, but there's no fulfillment of your request, of that promise within your lifetime, even something concerning bones. Okay? In my opinion, I think St. Nicholas is the most unbelievable bone story. like remember, people were very big on preserving bones. Okay? That's why we have Peter's bones, we have St. Andrew's bones, we have Thomas's bones, right? They have Thomas Aquinas' skull. He's a saint from 1,000 years, full skull from 1,000 years ago. Yeah. But, anyways, so St. Nicholas, if you're wondering, is real Santa Claus, right? He died 4th century, really early, right? And he was a monk. He was in Myra, which is modern-day Turkey, and then they buried his body, and he was known as St. Nicholas, where we get Santa Claus from. And they buried his body, but his bones, myrrh came out of it apparently, like it smelled good. Yeah, and this was from 4th century all the way till all the way to 10 something, which is essentially 700-800 years later. Okay, it was buried there, and then what happened was pirates. They essentially looted his body. They came all at once pretending to pray, and they completely looted. So this is 700-800 years later. They looted his body and they brought it to Italy. From Turkey to Italy, so they can set up a basilica, right? So his dead body is stolen. Santa Claus brought to Italy, and that was roughly 1,000 years ago. And then in 2009, the Turkish government, because Myra's in Turkey, wanted to bring his bones from Italy all the way back to Turkey, because that's where they believe he belonged. But remember, think of it. Well, why do they want St. Nicholas's bones? They're Muslim. Turkey's 90% Islamic, right? Tourism, right? Is that if we have the bones of St. Nicholas, imagine the value of that, right? But anyways, the bone story of St. Nicholas is just, I find interesting. A lot of people know about, but anyways. But this is the story of the bones of Joseph, right? So, anyways, Let's go into faith in the generation of the Exodus. Can someone read verse 23 to 31? 11, Hebrews 11, 23 to 31.
Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. How far down? Do you want me to read?
To 31.
By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. That's it.
Okay. This is the faith in the generation of the Exodus. Okay, look at verse 23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful. And they were not afraid of the king's edict. So this is the faith of essentially not Moses, but Moses' parents. Verse 23. Okay. They hid Moses in defiance of Pharaoh's genocidal decree. In Exodus 1 and 2, we know that he was put in the basket, right? And they were not afraid of the king's edict. This is very similar also in Exodus 1. It talks about the midwives of the Hebrew people, where they were supposed to kill, essentially, every male that was a Hebrew, but they did not. They lied, right? But they were not afraid, right, of the king's edict. Stephen, in his long sermon of Exodus 7, also calls, he says that he was beautiful before God, in that long passage of Exodus 7. So, again, 2 passages here saying that Moses was beautiful. He was a beautiful baby. So, again, we have the faith of Moses' parents here preserving life. Now, faith, remember this, I always say that you don't know a person can say, oh, I believe this, I believe that, could Jesus tattoo, bumper sticker, right, whatever, t-shirt, you could all that, you're saying that. That's just declaration. You always want to take it with a grain of salt. At the end of the day, it's what comes out of a person. How does this person respond on road rage? How does this person respond when things don't go their way? How does this person respond when things do go their way? What comes out? That's essentially who a person is. This is non-theoretical. This is true. This is practice, right? This is science. Faith, if someone declares the real faith, leads to something. Real faith changes when it comes to action. Okay? The faith that was inside the parents of Moses preserves life. Faith, it leads to fruit, right? Kind of James chapter 2, the faith that works is dead. It leads to certain things. What it leads to here, the fruit that comes from faith, is faith values life and it preserves it. Why? Genesis 1:27, we are image bearers, the imago Dei. Okay, humans are image bearers, and as a result, there's a priority for us to preserve human life. Right? This is why we consider murder to be wrong. It's because you removed an image bearer. We're not supposed to do that. God is. Right? But again, there's something sacred about preserving human life. The early Christians, it says this in the Didache. The Didache was a book in the first century. It was written around the time of the Bible. It says, "You shall not kill a child by abortion, nor kill what is born." So this is first century. Okay, what happened was that the Romans would discard a child, a baby, when they were a baby or even before they were born. They would conduct abortions. If there was a defective child, right, if a child had, say, like one leg, or a lot of times if they were just female, they would just get rid of the baby because they wanted males, right? And this was a practice that the Romans used to. Guess who came in and protected those children? The Christians did. They were known as, instead of they'd be tossed in the trash can or garbage, they would take them and they would nurture and parent that child. They would adopt them, right? But that's what faith does. It preserves human life. I see that, and we kind of see that here. Corrie ten Boom, who is a Dutch woman, was that her dad was killed. Her and her sister were in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany, killed as well. But she ended up escaping. The reason why they were killed was because it was known as the secret place. They hid Jews, right there. And she wrote about it, and she told the world. But again, what led her to do that? It's her faith. Why? Real faith does something. It's not just yapping. It's not just talking. Your life goes somewhere. One of the things that it does is it preserves life. Okay, kind of like what we see in Moses' parents. Okay, 24. It says, by faith Moses. Now it's not the faith of Moses' parents. Now the faith of Moses. By faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king. Twice it says that, right? For he endured as seeing him who is invisible, God. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch him. Okay, so now we're talking about the faith of Moses. So first, he refuses. So he refuses the royal status. Yeah, NDT, non-destructive testing.
It's what?
Non-destructive testing. Yeah. So we have he refuses the royal status, right? It says he refuses to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Do you think there's a temptation in people to associate with some sense of royalty? Does it give a human pleasure, right? Honor. I think honor is a huge drug for humanity, right? And especially in certain cultures. But when it comes to royalty, like I think this is just like a general monarch or any high status, I think we naturally kind of want to be in that crowd, right? If like there's a sense of honor if you are associated with a king, someone that's close, right? I'm just being honest. It's just my observation. There's not a lot of us here, so we could talk like this, but like I kind of get that from Trump's kids, right? They all have different moms, right? But they're Trump. That's dad. That's dad, right? You kind of get that. Like there's an honor in the sense of being associated with like someone who's high up or a general or, you know what I mean? There's Moses could have had that, but he refused that sense of honor, right? Instead of being associated, he could have taken it, but he didn't. Okay? He rejected pleasure, right? So desire, and he accepted suffering. He went through the cost. So remember, faith leads to something. It doesn't just stay. It doesn't just talk. Faith refuses worldly pleasures and accepts suffering. That's what it led to for Moses. What was it? What did it lead to? He denied worldly pleasure. He denied worldly pleasure, it says. For Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He refused it. Faith leads to refusing worldly pleasures and accepting suffering. From a Christian perspective, from a Christian worldview perspective, is that real pleasure if you really get down to the heart of it, it stems from God. This is why humans, pleasure towards things of the world is a disordered state that we have inside of us. That's how we do it. Okay? But when reordered, we naturally pursue God. So Psalm 16:11 says, in your presence there's fullness of joy. There's fullness of joy. Blaise Pascal once says, the man who goes into a brothel is seeking God, subconsciously seeking God. So the man that's knocking on the brothel, he is subconsciously seeking after God. There's a connection that he's after. There's a longing that he's after. There's a pleasure that he's after. Right? Disorderedness says, oh, it's that over there that's going to do it. Right? I'm drawn towards this. But it's a disordered state. Right? When reordered and put in a proper context, Moses, right? You see things clearly, God. St. Augustine wrote about this. He says, you have made us for yourself, O God, and our God is restless until it rests in you. Okay, and he's the one that came up with a concept in his book, The Confessions, about disordered desires. Right? He's a monk in the 4th century, around the same time of St. Nicholas, but wrote The Confessions, which essentially talks about his struggle as a teenager, his struggle and like finding God against this pursuit against pleasure, worldly pleasure. Right? But the heart of what he's saying is the problem with man is that our hearts are disordered. We love things that should not be loved as much, too much. We love the things that we should love, God, too little. So there's this disordered state, and as a result, this is how we all function, which is why society is the way that it is. No different from his time, and during the collapse of the Roman Empire, no different from our time in the 21st century here in America. Whether you believe America is going up or down, the point is it's in a disordered state. Okay? So remember, faith refuses worldly pleasure and it accepts suffering. Remember, that's what it does. There's fruit. Okay? Faith fearlessly forsakes evil. Okay? Moses, Hebrews says Moses left Egypt not fearing the anger of the king. Okay? He fearlessly forsakes evil. Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Okay? Moses' courage comes from seeing what? Him who is invisible. Okay? He understood. Remember, early Christianity, they refused the worship of the emperor. Okay? They refused the worship of the emperor, which is or bending the knee to the emperor, which is essentially why they were considered martyrs and they got them killed. A lot of them could have stayed alive, but remember, they were given the chance. You could deny Christ, acknowledge Caesar as your Lord, right? But they all said no to Caesar, yes to Jesus, right? So this was a way of kind of getting to the heart of a person's allegiance. Okay, I saw a clip not too long ago of there are people trying to work for, say, the U.S. government, IT, FBI, and some of them might be from Japan or Korea, right? But what's an issue is that a lot of them will be from North Korea, and they'll say they're from Japan, but they're really spies. And there's this video. It came out last week. There was this interview with someone from Japan, right? That came up. That was saying he's an IT guy. Was speaking English enough to understand him. Okay, and then the interviewer was like, "Hey, we get a lot of this. We get a lot of spies from North Korea. So I just want to see your allegiance right now. Could you say Kim Jong-il is a fat, like, ugly pig?" He said that literally. And he said, "Could you say that?" And then the guy, like, in a switch, like, acted like he didn't know what he was like. Huh? You can just see him freeze. And he's like, yeah, I know, but could you say that? Could you say the words, Kim Jong-il is a fat ugly? And he's like, and you can see where his allegiance was, right? So it's a means of testing someone's allegiance. Very similar to the first century. How do you know this guy is for Rome? How do you know this guy is for the guy we crucified, Jesus of Nazareth? Okay? Early Christians would always, so in the early Christians, they would say, Jesus Lord. The opposite of what this guy did, essentially. Okay? But again, faith fearlessly forsakes evil. Faith admits the need for forgiveness. Faith admits the need for forgiveness. It says, verse 28, by faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch him. This is in reference to the last plague, the 10th plague, which it was the angel of death, the destroyer. But the caveat was, if you take a lamb and you take its blood and you sprinkle it on top of your doorpost, the angel of the Lord will overpass you. That's what's called the Passover. It will not harm you. But every firstborn child, if there's no blood of the goat, it will kill you, essentially. Which is why Pharaoh says, you and your people can go. Okay? But what's the essence of the Passover? We talked about this earlier from chapter 8, 9, and 10, is that it's the need for forgiveness. Right? The Passover was a picture, was a type of Christ that pointed towards Christ. So the Jews started celebrating this thing called Passover, right? On the 14th of Nisan, the month. And what happened? When did Jesus die? Passover, right? Which is why the curtain was torn from top to bottom. Okay? But what's the implication? It assumes the need for forgiveness. Okay? What is the assumption of forgiveness? I have done wrong. Once you say it assumes the need for forgiveness, Passover, I assume I am in the wrong and I need some form of help. The attitude you don't want is the gaslighter, the one that could never admit their wrongdoing. Always some wiggle room to get out, right? Saul versus David. What's the difference between Saul versus David? David acknowledged his sin. Horrible things he did. But at least he can own up and says, you know what? I did that. Saul, oh, no. Could never admit it. Right? Could never admit his own wrongdoing. Right? And he died in that state. Okay? So remember, faith admits the need for forgiveness. Okay? Any questions thus far? No? All right. Verse 29 and 30 says, by faith the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land. By the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. Okay, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish when those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. So essentially, verse 29 and 30 are the faith of the Israelite people, right? At the Red Sea, okay, and at Jericho, he brings up. So the sea, what does the sea imply? This is a supernatural act. This is creation obeys God. Creation obeys God. The Red Sea, animals, Balaam the talking donkey, right? If God wanted to be like Disney, right, where animals just start talking, and, whoa, what's going on, right? He could do that. That's nature bending for God. Okay? So, again, the Israelites, faith keeps following God in impossible situations. The Red Sea. Okay? Faith keeps following God even in impossible situations. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote that faith trusts God even in the midst of darkness. Okay? And also the Israelite people, what? They walked around the walls of Jericho. This is in the book of Joshua 7 times, right? This shows power belongs to God, right? Even walls could fall down just by walking around. Faith obeys the word of God even when it looks strange. Okay? This is all over the Bible. As long as the promise comes from God. Remember, what is faith? It's upon the person, who's saying what, and what is the promise. Person, promise. Person, promise. Even if the promise looks foolish, walk around there 7 times and it's going to fall down. Wait, what? Right? But wait, who's the person? Right? Who's going to take the final shot? Kwame Brown or Kobe Bryant? Who is the person? This is God. If God says this, even if it's foolish, because of the content, because of the character of the person, we trust him. And that's what the Israelites did. Okay? So, again, we see this all over the Bible where things that were like, wait, you want me to put my hands in the water? You want me to, right? And it's going to happen. Right? But again, it's faith obeys the word of God even when it seems strange. And verse 31, Rahab. Verse 31, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish when those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Right? So remember Rahab, she was a Gentile, she was a prostitute, she was an enemy of Israel. Right? But what does she say in Joshua 2 verse 11? O Lord our God, He is God in the heavens above and on earth beneath. She declared that God is God. Okay? So, remember, Matthew 1 even puts her in the hall of faith, or puts her in the genealogy of Christ. Remember, Rahab, even though a Gentile, even though a prostitute, was the great-grandmother of King David. Right? So, what does this show us? Faith leads to life. There's so many people who you would never expect to come to Christianity, never expect to bend the knee and say, Christ is Lord, and lo and behold, what is time, what does life do? People bend the knee and they say, Christ is Lord. Kind of like Rahab. Okay, we're seeing this in modern day events. I think because of the world of social media, we could see people's lives, if they consent to showing their life, right? But yeah, we're seeing so many conversions of like people you would never expect. You know, who 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like someone like Russell Brand, right? Right? Who was married to Katy Perry and like one of the pop star or actor icons, and now he just wrote a book on Christian. Well, how to become a Christian in 7 days. That's what his book's called. How to Become a Christian in 7 days. So, I would never expect something like that to happen. But again, we're seeing a lot of these stories of people you would never expect to come to Christ, all of a sudden submit to Christ. Okay? Let's go to Hebrews 11, 32 to 40. Can someone read? Hebrews 11, 32 to 40. Can someone read that out loud?
And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdom, enforced justice, obtained promise, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refused to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandered about in the deserts and mountains, and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commanded through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided everything better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect.
Okay. Look at verse 32. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, Obama? No. Not Obama. Samson, Jephthah, of David, of Samuel, and the prophets. Okay, so now the author of Hebrews is going to go on like a mishmash. It's ba, 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 like, and the whole point is not to say that Gideon, Barak, Samson, or Jephthah is of less value, because he doesn't go. He doesn't tell you about Barak. He doesn't tell you about, like, what about Gideon in his faith? What about Barak? What about Samson? What about Samuel? Like, he's not specific. The other people, he was very. He says, "This is how." Right? He'll mention them and he'll say this, and he'll just do a fire in verse 32 of people, right? So we have the whole point of it is not to say that they're not important, but the whole point of it, of what the author is doing, is saying, I have so many examples, like we have Abraham, yeah, we have Moses, yeah, we have pre-civilization people, yeah, we have the patriarchs, yeah, we have the Moses. But I got way more. I can go on and 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 on. He's saying, that's what he's saying, right? So Gideon, right? Obviously, God tells him to have a small army, 300 people, and they defeat the Midianites, right? Barak, he's also from the book of Judges, who helped Deborah, with the judge or a prophetess, if you want to say, in war. And then you have Samson, right? We know Samson, long hair, strong muscles, weak internally, but right? And then he eventually pushed the two pillars and saved killed all the Philistines, right? We have Jephthah. This is all mostly from the book of Judges, essentially. All these guys. Jephthah is also in the book of Judges. His mom was a prostitute, or not the same as his. So he had brothers, and they had the real mom, and he had someone else other than his real mom, or the mom, possibly a prostitute. And as a result, his brothers disowned him and says, "You can't have any of the inheritance," right? So he became a general and fought, I believe, the Ammonites, and then it was that vow, that painful vow that he made in the book of Judges, saying, if you give me victory, Lord, whatever comes out of whatever comes out of that direction first, I'm going to sacrifice to you, right? And then he won. They defeat the Ammonites, and he says, Lord, whatever comes out, guess who comes out of there? His daughter. And he has to sacrifice his own daughter. Right? Painful, very painful. But that's Jephthah. King David, we have, or David, obviously we know David. Samuel, obviously we know Samuel the prophet. You guys are watching
Yes.
House of David, so you could just have the faces, right? You could have the faces there, and the prophets. So essentially, notice these people though. The one thing that we notice through a lot of these guys is that these are broken people. These people aren't perfect. These people are Samson, David, right? These people are not perfect. God honors authentic faith even when it's not perfect. Even when it's not perfect. There's this confusion people get, Christians get it, non-Christians get, is when someone says, I'm a Christian, and I know it's how you brand yourself, I get it. When someone says they're a Christian, what they're saying is, I'm not perfect, but I need this thing. That's what they're saying. But a lot of times, a lot of the interpretations people say is, when someone says that they're Christian, the assumption is they're saying is, I am perfect. I got my stuff together, right? I'm Christian. I'm moral. The real I'm a Christian implies the opposite. I'm imperfect, therefore I need. So when someone falls, it's not, right? Because that's what someone, right? The shame, right? It's yeah. I never claimed that I was perfect. The fact that I'm saying I'm a Christian implies the very opposite. How about that? That's how it should be presented, and that's accurate. Because of what? When you're a Christian, you assume anthropology. When you're a Christian, you assume. When I say you assume anthropology, you assume the state of man. Man is therefore broken. Romans 3. That's what you assume. Therefore, I need Jesus. Okay? One thing that Hebrews 11 and our culture, it just doesn't merge. And when I say our culture, is cancel culture. Cancel culture is, obviously we see it, is unforgiving. That's what they are. Cancel culture is unforgiving. They'll get a person, politician, actor, whoever, and wherever they go with their idea or their ideas, their words, guess what people do? They see someone and they do an audit, right, on their background. And they'll go into their social media 20 years ago, 10 years ago, look up all the tweets, and all of a sudden like, oh, did you see what this person tweeted 15 years ago? Right? Doesn't matter who. Kevin Hart, supposedly he's going to, right, be the announcer at the Oscars, and they found a tweet of his 10 years ago that was apparently homophobic, gets canceled. Unforgiveness, right? And that's essentially what the people of Hebrews 11 is. They're imperfect, right? But the whole point of the tone of Hebrews versus cancel culture is, cancel culture says, strike one, gone. Strike one, gone. Right? Where's Ellen DeGeneres? Left and right.
In the UK.
Exactly, gone. Canceled by the left, not the right, the left, right? But unforgiving, right? But look at all the people of Hebrews. Issue, receipts. But again, it's a different attitude. It's, this is who we are, but we need Christ, right? He is who we push to the world versus our sense of perfection. Okay?
Tell Prince Andrew.
What's that?
Tell Prince Andrew.
Tell Prince Andrew, right?
He's getting
Yeah.
nullified.
We have to hurry up here. I think we're fine. I think we're okay. Yeah. Verse 33 to 37 says, who through faith, now it doesn't mention anyone now. It's just going to mention actions. Who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to fight. Okay, women received back their dead by resurrection. Okay, so that's one section there. Okay, to the middle of verse 35. You know what that says? Let's continue. Some were what? Tortured. Now all of a sudden we go into the negative. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, and destitute, afflicted, mistreated. Okay, so here the author splits into two categories. So we have verse 33 to the mid of 35, which triumphs through faith. They're all triumphs, right? And then in the middle of verse 35 to 37, suffering through faith. The first is triumph, right? They won wars, and then all of a sudden suffering, right? So conquered kingdoms, who? Joshua, David, right? Practiced righteousness, probably talking about Samuel, David, or Daniel possibly, right? Because it doesn't have any names there. Received promises, right? Joshua, he received a partial promise, right? Shut the mouths of lions. Who we might be speaking about here? Daniel. Who else? Maybe David. Maybe David says like he conquered lions before. It says escaped fire. Who might that be talking to? Escaped fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel 3. Okay. Escaped the sword. Maybe Elijah. He never died. Possibly. So we're guessing. This doesn't say. We have to get our Old Testament knowledge and kind of see who he's talking about. Possibly Elisha. Maybe David fleeing Saul, repeated over and over. He kept fleeing Saul. Were made strong out of weakness. You were made strong out of weakness. Who might be that? They were made strong, but out of weakness. Maybe Samson. Remember, Samson was weak. right? When he had no hair and he prayed to God, and it was a very humbling moment, right? But he became strong after he prayed to God. He got his hair started to grow, right? And then they won battles. Many probably victories under the kings of Jehoshaphat. Okay, but remember, this is triumphs through faith. But then all of a sudden, suffering through faith. It says some were tortured, refusing release. Okay, others endured mockery, flogging, chains, imprisonment. Who might that might be? Would be Jeremiah, possibly, right? Some were stoned, probably referring to a lot of the prophets, right? Others were sawn in two. Sawn in two. What might that be referring to? We don't know. It doesn't say, right? Most scholars believe this is referring to Isaiah. A lot of scholars believe Isaiah was sawn in two. Okay, many were killed by the sword. They lived in poverty, wandering in hardship. Okay, a lot of scholars believe the torturing part is in reference to Judas Maccabeus and 2 Maccabees 7. Right, it's the Catholic Bible, okay, essentially the Apocrypha that talks about torture that some of the Jews went through. Okay, but remember, victory is not merely survival or success, but it's faithfulness to God regardless of the outcome. That's what the essence of verse 33 to 37 is about. Remember, it talks about success, faith and hardship. Okay, a lot of the times we will take the successes and we'll say this is faith. This is only God. When things happen your way, what happens when things don't happen your way? Right? And that's the point of it. Failure, success, it doesn't. The whole point is what is inside stop the theory, get to what is inside the person. How do they respond when they're given $1 billion, or they lose $1 billion, or they're in $1 billion in debt? What comes out of the person? You ever see a person? It's like, Johnny was this, youth group kid, very nice, and all of a sudden he went to college and he became the biggest partier, and he was a jerk, and it's like, what happened to him? He changed. Did he change, or was he always like that? The environment never happened. That's the good, right? Meaning something externally. He was given $1 billion and the real him came out, right? It was Caligula, the third Roman emperor. Same thing, right? He was quiet. His parents were murdered, but he was quiet until he got the royalty. When he sat on the throne and became emperor of Rome, just the real him came out. Carnage, murder, the real him. What happened? Was he corrupted? No, he was always in it. He just never had that position, right? Or something bad happens to you, right? Like the apostles, right? Like the apostles, they're in a state where, hey, you could live, or you could. But what is their faith? What's truly inside of them? Okay? Any questions?
What did it mean when it said women receive their dead raised to life again?
So same thing. We don't know, right? Because it doesn't say. Most likely, that's referring to 1 Kings 17. Remember the widow and that raised Elijah. Elijah raised her son. Most likely, yeah. But again, we don't know because it doesn't say. But if you scan the Old Testament, the only time a woman received the dead back was 1 Kings 17. And there was a dead son, and Elijah came and he resurrected that child from the dead. Right? So most likely that's that. But again, we don't know. We see how we're kind of putting things on because it doesn't say. Okay, verse 38 to 40, and then we'll finish here. Of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And all of these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect. Okay, what they received, remember, they were rejected by the world, but they were approved by God. Okay, this is what they received. They were rejected by the world, but they were approved by God. Second, they did not receive the full promise. Notice how most of these promises that they believed in, they had faith, never happened in their lifetime. Do you think Abraham in Genesis 12, he's like, you're going to be father? Do you think no, it never happened. Isaac never happened. Jacob never happened. Right? Joseph, even his bones, right? It never happened. A lot of the promises that they believed at the time never happened, but that's the point of it. Right? Even for us, the promise that we believe is always, in this context, is future. Okay? It's in reference to the new Eden, the presence of God being restored. Okay? And last, what they received, the fulfillment that comes through Christ. And this is in reference to the Old Covenant, New Covenant, where everything in the Old Testament, this is what the whole book of Hebrews is about, all the things that were in the Old Testament pointed towards Christ, and he fulfilled them. He fulfilled them. He fulfilled it. So remember, faith. What is faith? Faith is the belief in, it's future tense, but it's a hope, future tense, but it's a belief in the person and promise of God. Okay, but it's in reference to chapter 10, verse 39, the faith that perseveres. Okay, this is reference to Christ. And then he goes and mentions, and he uses chapter 11 as an illustration to show, hey, look, God always used faith. It was never about the law. He always used faith, even before Abraham, right? Abel, he starts off with. Abel had faith, right? He goes all the way, and the whole point is that most of these guys, their promises were never fulfilled. And most of the promise that we believe, it's probably not going to be fulfilled too, right? The promise for us is the recreation of the new earth. There's a longing in every single one of our hearts, right? You know that longing where you say, man, how come the world looks like this? Why is it when I look at my phone, when I look at the news, it's like carnage. It's chaos. And there's an is and there's an ought. It is like this and it ought to be. It ought to be. And that ought is a new heavens. And that's what God has put inside of every single one of our hearts. That longing that says, you know what? This is a stressful year. I need to go on vacation. See that longing. You're longing for the new earth. You're longing for what? Shalom. Peace. Right? But will that happen in our 80 years or 90 years, whatever, however long we're here on this earth? Maybe, maybe not. The maybe might be if Christ returns in our lifetime, right? Which would be awesome. But if not, then we're going to be in the category of these people in Hebrews 11, where the fulfillment was never in your lifetime, right? And then the author is going to go on and now go to the people and say, verse chapter 12, therefore, since you are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run the endurance of the race to set before us, looking to Jesus. And now he's going to go to us. From them, those in the Old Testament, and he's going to apply it to us. Or to them, but their application in chapter 12 also applies to us today. Okay? And we're going to continue this next week. Okay? So, any questions from chapter 11? Online?
I just think we have to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about with faith. That even if we don't get everything, that God has a reason for whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's hard, or when something happens sometimes that's bad to us or for us. Why did this happen, Lord? But He knows why or what's. We have to trust and have faith in Him that it's okay.
Yeah. That's it.
Not always easy to do, but.
Not my will, but thy will.
Yeah. Online, guys? Matthew?